just relaxed and paying attention.
Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and our executive producer and research assistant is Laura Cordner. Our engineer is Anita Brockington. Our guest tonight is my old friend Skip Brooks, and we're going to get to him in just a minute, but I just wanted to say happy birthday for a very dear friend of mine, Ann Koch. She was one of my mentors and helped me reestablish the Apocalypse mural at the Johns Hopkins University. She was a great help, fine person, and she has a wonderful daughter too. I believe her daughter's name may be Ann as well, I believe. Happy birthday. Okay, friends. Our guest, as you know, is Skip Brooks. And we are going to give a rundown on some of his central characters in these books so that we can follow the storyline. Let's review these three books in chronological order, starting with book number 1 of the trilogy that you released in 2019 called Hazel's Creek, a Memoir. Who are the characters and characters that you chose to tell the story of Hazel Creek and what happens to them?
Well, as I said, the whole idea of Hazel Creek was started with a search for family. And so I found one of my wife's ancestors in a certain place and time that kind of stuck with me. His name was Jacob Fonslow Hall. And this book is basically his story told by him, from birth to death, where he was born, who his family was, what the place where he was born was like. He goes to the Civil War, and he fights in a cavalry unit in Tennessee mostly. And then after Chickamauga, he decided he didn't want any more war, so he went home. And he followed the Little Tennessee River back to where he came from in western North Carolina. After that, he married, had children, his wife died. He had a bout with the moonshine, and gave that up. And he and his brother, his younger brother, decided to go out to the newly formed county of Swain in western North Carolina in the mountains and homestead 40 acres each, which is what they did. So, a lot of the experiences that Fonzie goes through are sort of my experiences. Obviously, I don't speak like he does, but I did try to get the flavor and the rhythms of the way the people in the mountains speak, and just was a labor of love all the way through. It's a tall tale, a long, tall tale. And that's basically Hazel Creek. It's a story of one man's life through his eyes.
And he served in the which army?
He was in the Confederate Army. He was conscripted in 1862 into a company called Folks's Battalion, just cavalry, and they did most of their damage over in eastern Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And strangely enough, for many years after the Civil War, there was still a lot of bad blood along the Tennessee, western North Carolina border. They're near Greenville and Johnson City up in there. There's a lot of bad stuff went on. But yeah, he was a Confederate. He was a cavalry.
I was very impressed by his horse. Champion, was it Champion?
Champ, yeah.
Champ. Wow, what a horse.
Champ was actually my horse.
Oh, what, really?
He was my horse. I had a horse when I lived in Gatlinburg. So I wrote Champ in as Fonzie's horse.
Well, I should have put that together there. But during the story, though, boy, this horse saved his life many times. And I just loved the experience of him bumping into someone who fought on the other side, and they're getting together and talking about it. Would you share a little bit about...
the horse bit him.
Yes, and the horse bit him.
The horse bit the guy. The guy was from the Pennsylvania unit, and he bit him. The horses were war horses, and they knew how to kick, and they knew how to respond.
Well,
So there was a lot of biting and kicking from the horses too.
I'm surprised that they weren't killed sooner during those kind of wars, because they were
A
throwing
lot of horses were killed.
Yeah, they were throwing each other at each other, and it was really good, from my perspective, to hear how these two guys got together and understood that, they could have been on other sides, but, there's a lot of parallels in the kind of things they were doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were friends. I mean, they spent all their time together. They worked together. They fought together, and that Champ was my horse. I mean, Champ taught me how to ride.
Was he really was he a very big horse?
Yeah. Very big. About 15 hands. He was a 5-gated horse. He could rack, which is a single foot. It's kind of a prance, and it's a old plantation gait. So we would have rack and horse races and things. And he was a great horse. He was not mean. Didn't have a mean streak in him, and he was really fun to ride.
Did he pass when you knew him? Did he die when you knew him?
No. When I had to let him go, I bought him a couple of years worth of pasture out in a real rural area called Kodak and gave him to the farmer who owned it.
And then he passed on then?
I imagine so.
Yeah. Now, remind us what happened in Monteith's Mountains. Death Stalks the Southern Appalachians, which is chronologically part 2 of the trilogy.
Yeah, and it had Jacob Fonslow Hall dies in 1898, end of book. And so the next book picks up 2, 3, 4 years later, I think 5 years later, in 1902 or 1903. And it's the story of a very bad man, a serial killer who I dreamed up, Lord knows how. And his name was Walker Tom Monteith. And the story is basically about him, and then on the other side about the good guy, I guess, who is part Cherokee, part Mohawk Indian. He's there for a lot of historical reasons. And they kind of interweave through the book. Walker Tom is always chasing and always trying to find David Brandt was his name. And then there's a woman, Taylor Henry, who manages and runs a camp for loggers up on the top of the mountain. So it all kind of revolves around that, this long chase. It's kind of sinister and dark in a lot of places because Walker Tom is a really bad man.
In what ways?
Actually,
in what ways was he bad?
He's a serial killer. He killed women, killed a lot of ladies. He was a bit of a hermit himself, lived up in the mountains alone. And
was he the one that had 7 wives?
No, that was his father.
Oh, his father had.
His father's name was Black Walker, and he had a colony, and there is a Bill Walker who actually did have a colony back where I placed it in an area called Tremont in the mountains, and he had 7 wives. Sent all the girls to college too, which I later learned.
Wow,
it wasn't that far out but anyway, he was a fire-breathing Baptist preacher among other things, and he really did not do well by his son Walker Tom. But anyway, he's a great character. He's probably the best character book-wise that I ever wrote. At one time, my editor said, "You've got to make him meaner. You like him too much." And she was right, so I had to make him do really terrible things in order to juice the book up. But it covers about 18 months in 1902 and 1903, and it's a story about it's a love story and a chase and a murder mystery and all those sorts of things. And it ends in it would be probably the fall of 1903. I wanted to do a third book, and the time I wanted to focus on was my cat's giving me a hard time, were the 1930s, which was a period of change for the mountains because the park was being built, and there were a lot of people, families, generations of families who had lived in the park for 100 years or more, who were being dispossessed. They were their properties were condemned by the state of Tennessee, and they had to move off their properties. And so there's a natural tension there, and also created a hero who lived in Aedan's Cove, fifth generation, had gone off to the First World War just to see the world, and stayed on in Dublin for a few years and was involved in Irish politics right around the time when Ireland, late 1910s, 1920, 1937, and we've got third book in a trilogy is always hard to write because you want to write a story that stands by itself, but you also want to wrap up the two previous books in some way to give it not a happy ending, but to kind of make closure. In my books, they're always about family closures, and that was my overarching desire in Aedan's Cove, was to wrap it up, but also wanted to have a good story. And the story is again a love story, and it's technically called Aedan's Cove: The Farewell. And everyone left, literally. The families who lived inside the Smokies that became the park, they had to leave. And in the end, he leaves too. And it was a very sad time in the mountains. 2 generations down from that, the people who live there and own the businesses there, in the tourist business there, they're doing great by it. So what went on was terrific. But if you can imagine people who moved into Cades Cove and the eastern part of the national park and lived and raised families from 1800 to 130, 140 years, and here comes the government telling them, you've got to get out, we're building a park.
Now
was hard.
There's one character who was actually an Ivy League graduate. I'm trying to recall.
The bad guy in Hazel's Cove. Yeah.
Yes. That was a very strange situation there, because
I wanted to create a character, a bad guy.
Well, you got me.
I wanted to create him. Yeah.
An
antagonist. I wanted to create a bad guy who wasn't bad to begin with.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That events made him the bad guy, and the choices that he made him the bad guy.
Yeah.
And that was my goal for him. He was not a bad person, but his choices that he made in his life and the events that he went through, being a guy from Boston,
mm-hmm.
Winding up in the middle of the wilds of the Great Smoky Mountains, real culture difference, and I feel like I got it with him.
Yeah. I think you did too.
He just got worse and worse. Yeah, he got worse and worse every page you turned.
Yeah,
I wanted to be able to show his degeneration,
mm-hmm.
and you got to show reasons for those things. My editor once told me, "Show, don't tell." When you write, don't tell people. Show it to them so they can visualize it and they can see it and they can pick their own path through your story.
Well,
she was right.
So he was well educated. His wife was well educated,
yeah.
And they were getting along pretty good. And then his real character came out, and as you noted there, in which after he hit her, he did hit her, right?
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, he was basically he probably would have shot her. Maybe her own if things would have continued.
I don't know. He wasn't. I don't know if he was going to do that, but the reaction of hitting her was out of probably the depths of frustration, because at that point he knew what he had done. He knew the choices he had made, and he knew, the accessory to crimes that he was. And I think it was out. And then when she decided to take a walk,
mm-hmm.
to leave him. That was too much for him, and I can see that. I don't condone it, certainly, but I can see that people are driven to extremes sometimes in their anger. And this character was at that time.
Well, he was hoping to get much better situation with the President of the United States at that particular time, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, he was. I threw Joseph P. Kennedy in there as the new head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and this character Walter Leary, he was working there, and Joe Kennedy said, "This will be good for you," and Roosevelt his term is going to end in 1940, and if things work out, you'll be in a good position to go with me up the ladder. Well, it didn't work out in 1940, but Walter did okay after the book was over. I did a little appendix at the end telling what happened to the people. But my cat's talking to me.
What's the name of your cat?
Draco Meowfoy.
Hey!
My daughter named him.
a family cat there. Yeah. Oh, we got to take a break now on 21st Century Radio. Yes, we are going to take a break with Skip Brooks. We're talking about his characters, especially in Aedan's Cove, which I found that one was really a powerful one because when I first started, when I was first introduced to him, I thought this guy was really sharp. He was really on top of things. And then he turned out basically that his whole life was thrown away because of what he did. And what he did was he allowed, let's put it this way, some other people to eliminate another person. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, a bunch of people. Yeah.
A bunch of people. And the way he eliminated was cutting off their fingers, cutting off their... Did any heads get cut off there?
Good stuff.
Yeah, tough stuff.
No, I haven't gotten to that point. Maybe I'll put a head cutting in the next one.
Okay, all right. We're going to take our break here, and we'll be back with Skip Brooks. Go to skipbrooksprojects.com and find links to our guests on 21st Century Radio's Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Beatles fans in your life, makes a great present, announcing our new book on the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, on sale now at yellowsubmarinebook.com. It couldn't be simpler. That's yellowsubmarinebook.com. Full of color with over 200 illustrations, plus all new interviews and symbolic interpretations. It's all in the mind, inside the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, Volume 2. Loads of valuable bonus prizes and contests offered on our Facebook page, /Yellow Submarine Book. Follow us there and win some toys. This book dives deep. Haven't you ever wondered what it all means when we say we all live in a yellow submarine? Well, order this book and find out. yellowsubmarinebook.com. That's yellowsubmarinebook.com.
Hello, this is Lois Harris Powell of the Chantels. You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
It's the Chantels. Boy, I haven't heard them for a while. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio with our guest, Skip Brooks. We're going to give him a PhD today. It's okay. Would you like a PhD?
Sure.
Okay. It won't cost you hardly anything.
No, I got a BA from Ole Miss.
Well,
so I could use a PhD.
Yeah, well, everyone needs one of those. So we're out selling them for $25.
There you go.
There actually are places like that, I just play around with that.
Yes, I heard.
But it took me 5.5 years to get mine done, and I never want to do it again.
It took me 20 years to get a BA.
Well, that's because
I got out of high school in 1960, and I graduated from Ole Miss in 1980.
Well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. You're not going to blame me for this.
No, it was my fault.
Yes, it was. I bet you were just having a good time. Well, because that's what you artists always do. You guys always have a good time.
Right.
Now, are you working on any new books?
I am working on new books. I have one that I've kind of I hit not a dead end. I hit like a tree or something, and I haven't been able to get farther. But I got one that I've been working off and on for a couple of years called Beck's Island, and it's about a washed-up musician living in a house on an island in the North Gulf off the coast of Mississippi or Alabama. And his dog, he's got an old dog, and the dog's name is Steely Dan. Steely Dan dies in the opening chapter, and so he has Steely Dan cremated, and he sets out on a road trip to find some place to sprinkle Dan's ashes. And so through a lot of flashbacks, I'm trying to bring this guy, this washed-up musician, from young musician all the way up to where he is and set in 1988. I've gotten far enough, but a lot of it is me, and the experiences in it are mine. Things that happened in studios in New York and things that happened on the road and all that sort of thing. And I find that that's very, very, I'm having a hard time digging all that stuff out of myself. I don't know whether I'm putting up a wall or what, but anyway, while I put that one aside, I've got another one, and it's just in sort of the startup thing. I've learned more through Facebook. I've learned more about Baltimore than I ever did when I lived there.
Is that right?
Yeah, I belong to a couple of groups, Baltimore groups, county and city, and they post a lot of old pictures and lead me in different directions. And they got me hooked up with, every once in a while, the Johns Hopkins will do a 5-minute podcast thing about a different part of the city and how it developed and the history of it and all that. So what I found out was that Baltimore was a big canning town in the early part of the 1900s.
Yeah, Continental can.
They canned a lot of, but there were a lot of other ones too.
Well, sure.
And so I've got a hero who is kind of a supervisor, machine supervisor at one of these companies, and he gets on a boat in 1916 and sails to Liverpool, then to London, and then he goes to Cambridge to help a company called the Chivers and Sons upgrade their canning facilities and their machinery and everything, and to put the thing together and then train the workers to do it. And I also have always been really interested in a character in history, Sidney Riley, who was the subject of a masterpiece theater many years ago called Riley, Ace of Spies. And what I'm doing now is researching kind of Riley's life. He was at that time, in 1916, he was working for British Secret Service, but he was also selling guns to both sides in New York. So I want to get those two together, maybe have a woman involved to sort of entice them together on a ship on the way to Liverpool, and have the actual sort of mystery start there. I'm thinking of tying it into Riley was trying to find a way to draw the U.S. into the First World War, and there was a thing called the Zimmerman Letter, which was a real big deal in 1916. So right now I'm at the fun stage of research on it, but I really have good feelings about this one. I call it Sydney and George.
The Zimmerman Letter, did you say Zimmerman Letter?
Zimmerman Letter, yeah. It was a letter that purported that the German government wanted to create a link with the Mexican government and get Mexico to attack the United States from the south. And in as a reward for that, they get Texas and New Mexico and Arizona back, that kind of thing. It never really materialized, but I think that may be my pivot point in the plot. I'm not sure what's going to happen to them, but so far I got these two characters growing in my head. So I got two ideas going. One called Beck's Island and the other one called Sydney and George.
You don't get
I'm really looking forward to Sydney and George. It sounds like fun. So anyway,
it does, but you don't get them mixed up though, huh?
No.
You're capable being able to keep them separate. I would have
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do.
Well, they're two different stories. They're two different times, two different everythings. And the first one I talked about, Beck's Island, it's kind of sort of autobiographical, but not me. It's the protagonist is a separate and individual person all his own. But the experiences and the journey were probably mine. At least they have been up till I hit this tree here, and I can't go any farther.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, now that we are elders, are you still writing and producing music? And if so, how many instruments?
I am.
Well, how many instruments do you play anyway?
Well, physically, I can play pretty much anything with strings or keys on it, or or they're structured like that, like a vibraphone or something like that.
Vibraphone.
But with the recording setup I have a little patch that will allow me to play just about every instrument known to man through my program called Pro Tools. So I can play saxophone, I can put horn charts together, and if you listen to any of the songs on that CD, the original Sins, or the other one that I sent you, Satori and Rai, all the horns are done off a keyboard on a computer.
Now that you're Now that you're mentioning Original Sins, can we review your most recent CD?
Original Sins was the last one I did was one called Satori and Rai.
Right.
On Rai, which I think we listened to the last time. That was really written as one sit down. It was one piece. They were all written for that CD. But Original Sins, they're a conglomeration of songs that I'd written over the years that I really liked, and I never had a chance to record. And so I did them, and I really like that. That CD is probably, song-wise, the best one. It's better than the other one. But they're real songs, they're not long rambling, with 3 different movements and all that sort of thing.
You're talking about
They're
Original Sins.
poppy, they're Original Sins, yeah.
Well,
some of those songs are 30 and 40 years old on there. Come back from the 70s, but I never got a chance to do them, so I thought,
Can we take a listen to? Can we take a listen to it?
Sure.
Then,
Original Sins was just I was raised Catholic, and I was looking for a title for a CD, so I thought, well, why not Original Sins? Oh well.
Can we listen to the one called The Dog Called Bo, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And you notice how I spelled it.
B-O-H.
B-O-H.
National Bo. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was my dog. My dog's name was Bo, and I spelled it B-O-H for my childhood beer.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a listen to that. Please.
All right, hit it.
Hit it.
Talk it.
My dog Bo, she's really neat. She's got a sweet face and 4 feet. Well, 2 of them's paws. She don't break no laws. She's a good dog. The Bo's got a truck. It's an old Ford Ranger, course. I gotta drive 'cause she's always barking at strangers. She rides shotgun and hangs out the window. She has a good time. She's a friend of mine. She takes her time and she likes white wine. She sips it, don't you know? She's a good old dog. Come on, Bo. Let's go.
Oh. Well, how many dogs have you had in your life?
Whole bunch. Bo was my last one. She died about 5 years ago. She's a great dog. She was a rescue dog, mostly Labrador. I thought of her as a hippie dog.
A hippie dog?
Just a black dog. Hippie dog, yeah. She was really a wonderful animal, just very sweet and very kind. And she's a good dog. I didn't want to get another dog because I figured if I had another dog in 15 years, I don't know if I could lift it up.
Yeah, well.
So now I've got cats.
Yeah, we have the same problem with some of our dogs now, but one of them is about 180 pounds, it seems. So All right, let's take our break now. And then when we return, we'll listen to some more music. Welcome to the Blues is what we're going to hear.
This is Tony Butala of the Letterman. I'm proud to be a part of 21st Century Radio with the great Dr. Bob Hieronimus. He's our kind of guy. He loves harmony and music, and so do we.
Welcome back to 21st Century Radio with our guest Skip Brooks, and we're talking about some of his music, and we'd like to hear some more of it. What about For Tomorrow? Can we hear a bit of that, Dr. Kortner? She's ready. Up and at 'em.
So we sit here and fill this empty land for the reason to take another stand for the moment and for each other and for tomorrow. Tomorrow, tomorrow.
Skip, are you playing a harp there or what?
No, it's I don't know what it was. It was a stringed instrument of some kind that I recorded that one. That was probably the first one I did on this CD.
Oh, I thought that was
7-8 years ago.
that was beautiful. That really
That
was.
lyric, I wrote that lyric before I got married the second time. It was a couple of days before my wife and I got married 43 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
We sat down and wrote that song. Made a lot of sense.
It
If you read
did.
the lyric from top to bottom, you'll understand it.
But sometimes you lose another one with a story behind it. That's another one that I'd like to listen to.
Which one?
Sometimes you lose.
Sometimes you lose. Ain't it the truth?
Woke up this morning with an ache in my head and a telegram laying across my chest. Said you've been awarded first prize loser of the year. Pack up your bags and hide the telephone. Lock up your doors and get back on the road. Just goes to prove sometimes you lose. Just goes to prove sometimes you lose.
That's it. Yes. What can you tell us about Sometime You Lose, brother?
Sometimes I don't know. I wrote it right before I left New York, and it's the only country song I ever wrote. I think we went through that at one time before. I was a big fan of old time country and western back when I was a little kid, and listened to Hank Williams and Patsy Cline and all that. And this mood just came out as Sometimes You Lose.
Hank Williams has to be my favorite.
Hank was a poet. He's a great writer.
Yes, he was, and I almost had the chance of meeting with him. There was a hillbilly in our neighborhood who was a friend of his, and this hillbilly played his guitar all the time, lived with it all the time, and he said, "How would you like to meet him, Hank Williams?" And I said, "Well, that'd be terrific. Yeah, it's all right." Unfortunately, that was the time when Hank Williams' back went out, and he was supposed to play in Baltimore, and he just couldn't do it. And of course, since he had been doing a lot of drinking before, a lot of people didn't think he was having problems with his back, but he was. It was pretty serious.
Yeah, he was a serious drinker. He died when he was 29.
Yeah, Yeah, along with a lot of other rock and rollers there. He lived hard.
He did.
His wife really took a lot out on him, though. That was pretty tough.
Yes, I knew his wife. She had a chalet in Gatlinburg back in the 70s, and I knew her. Audrey, I think her name was.
Audrey, yeah.
Yeah.
But what was she like? I mean, you're a handsome guy, so she probably liked you.
I don't know. No. It was, she was a loud person. I remember that, and she could be belligerent too at times.
Well, she sure was belligerent to him. Jeez, whiz, that poor guy.
I guess.
So unfortunately, it really was a heartbreaker for me. But I still listen to him, and every time I get into one of my cars, I put him on all the time. He's quite something. Oh,
I do.
We got one more song, Dr. Kortner tells me.
What do we got?
Living Again.
This is an interesting song. It started out as like a little bossa nova song, but then it got real crazy after a while, and it turned out to be in this song here.
If I was back in New York, I'd be crazy for sure. I'd be hell on the street again. There's no way to live if I was back in New York. I'd be older, of course, and maybe never survive. You can make it. If I was back on the road, I'd be lonely and cold. Murderous life, it is. There's no way to live if I was back on the road. I'd turn into a toad and never be heard from again.
You must have had a hard time in New York. Where did you live?
Wasn't too bad. I lived in the West Village at Jane and Hudson for the first year I was there, and lived out in Queens and Flushing for about 2 years, and then got a rent control on the Upper West Side at 93rd and West End. We lived there. That was the last place we lived in New York. That was a nice area, that neighborhood.
Well,
in the 90s.
I never lived in nice neighborhoods in New York, so.
Well, there's a lot of bad ones too.
There sure were.
There's a lot of bad ones in Baltimore too. And
how can you say that? You can't say that. That's not true. Baltimore. Well, I never had to sleep out on a bench in Baltimore, but I had to in New York a couple of times, and that was pretty strange in itself. Yeah,
it is.
And by the way, then I had what'd you say?
A lot of odd people are wandering around in the dark in New York.
Indeed. And one time
I guess you were one of them.
Well, no, I wasn't so odd then. I was pretty well together at that time. Going up there talking to the big guys talking about whether or not I was going to do record album covers for Hendrix or whatever. And one of the terrible things I learned was that, you know how much I would have been paid to do a record album cover at that time? $100. $100.
Yeah.
$100. You couldn't do anything on $100 up there in New York,
I wouldn't. You could sleep on a park bench.
Well, I did. Well, I also slept in my car, which was a painted car, and because it was painted, everybody liked it, so no one bothered me, and it was most unusual though, right at the park there. Now I see you have a spiffy new website at skipbrooksprojects.com. How did the website come together?
Built it myself. I retired. When I retired, after the thrill wore off, I thought to myself, what am I going to do now? Oh, well, I still got the books. I think I'll write some books, but I'm going to need a website. So I built a website, and I learned about how to do that using a company called Wix.com. And it was a lot of fun. I like to do that sort of thing. But the website, if anybody goes to it, I have some drop-down menus with the songs on them. I even put in some pictures of the studio where I'm sitting now, where all the equipment and musical instruments are, and has my books there. And if you should be so moved you want to buy one or two, it gives you the links there. I've put a few of my poems up, some haiku. We drove all over Ireland, and all I did was sit in the back and write haiku.
Whoa.
To pass the time.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have...
I have a bunch of... I have on it, too, under the drop-down under the link called Chronicles. And the things I post on Facebook every now, some stories along the way. So there's some really short remembrances and stories and all kinds of things on that drop-down, too. So, like, even if you never buy something, I want you to enjoy the site and read the stories. And if you want to leave an email, you can do that. And but it was really fun. I like learning new stuff like that. And I had to learn how to do this. It was neat.
Well, we do have a little bit of time.
SkipBrooksProjects.com.
Okay, that's good. Do that. SkipBrooksProjects.com. Now, how about you got a little bit of time here? Can you read us a poem on your website called Sonic in Pentameter.
Iambic pentameter.
I almost got that.
My daughter, I think it was around 2006 or 7. She was a little girl then, and she was in school, and her assignment was to write a sonnet, and she didn't know how to do it, and I didn't know how to do it either. So, of course, I Googled it up, and out came this, and it's called Time, a sonnet in almost iambic pentameter. If I could but hold time within my hands, what moments would I then identify? Sunrise soft upon Alabama's land, evening's chill whereon I lay my head. A lady's purse of gold would I then give to understand time's ceaseless onward roll. How many lifetimes must I live till time exacts its final toll? And so I watch the ticking of the clock till I sail lost upon a sea of woe. Adrift in time I seek a friendly dock where I might understand time's ebb and flow. Time is not real, yet I cannot escape its long, slow march toward the pearly gates.
Well, you still got a long way to go before you get to the pearly gates. And is that what's...
Yeah, I hope so.
Where are you headed next? Where are you headed next, Skip?
Just writing. I want to finish more books. I really like to write. It's great therapy. You leave a little something behind. Mm-hmm. I guess that's important. I'm a showbiz guy. I like to do stuff like this. I've always been that way.
Always? Even when you were little? When you were little Skip Brooks?
Yeah. When I was little Skippy Brooks, yeah.
Did they call you Skippy then?
I played.
Is that peanut butter? Did they ever?
Oh yeah.
Did they ever get into that one?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
If
the whole thing.
My name was Hieronimus, and so I had to deal with hippopotamus and anonymous.
Yeah.
People thought that was very clever. And I guess that
children can be cruel.
Yes, they sure can. and then you could be called Skippy Brooks. That is your real name.
Skip is a nickname if you're a junior, and I'm a junior. My father's name was Skip Brooks. And he was in the neon sign business and then plexiglass sign business all his life.
Well, we are about out of time here on 21st Century Radio. It went too fast. I'm sorry if I had too much of a good time here, because
I enjoy these things. You're the only creative person I know, and the only person I can actually talk to about, the process we go through and share some ideas and stories and experiences. I just don't have anybody else like that. So every 2 years we have to get together and catch up.
That's right? Rules and regulations 506 of the Penal Code, that every 2 years we must get together. Well, I look forward to the next one, brother. And I hope you have a fine evening, and say hello to your cat, who behaved himself pretty well, I think.
I put him outside.
I guess that's how he behaved. See you later.
Love you, man.
I love you too, brother. SkipBrooksProjects.com. Here comes my favorite song.